everyone. Today I'll be giving you a basic overview of the programming language Java. So computers can only understand zeros and ones. So Java is a programming language that has a set of keywords that makes it easier for humans to tell computers what to do without having to use zeros and ones. So I have a programming environment open right now, and I'm using the platform IntelliJ. And a programming environment has to have a compiler which turns these keywords into zeros and ones that the computer can then execute. So, one very important thing that Java allows us to do is to store data. So you can store an integer value, int, and we can say an a is equal to 5. And basically then, in your code, whenever you refer to int a, the computer knows that you're referring to the number 5. So this is a primitive data type, and you can have multiple, you can represent multiple kinds of numbers with these primitive data types. You can say double B is equal to 4.5, so on. And usually statements end with a semicolon. So there are other kinds of data types as well. For example, a string. With strings, you can store names. So you can say string name is equal to girls spark. And for strings, you have to put them in quotation marks and again, end with a semicolon. So usually code goes in something called a method, and we'll get into methods more later. But for now, all you have to know is that there are certain keywords that you use to create a method. So you usually use public, static void, main, and this will be our main method. And you can have multiple methods in a code. And then you put all of your code in curly braces. So now that we have name stored as girl spark, we can print out girl spark. So we can use a preset method in Java, system.out.println, and we can say print name, and then we end with the semicolon. So let's run our code. And it prints girl spark. So now that we can do that, there are other interesting things you can do with this. For example, if we type name dot, that gives us all the things we can do with a girl spark. So you can say to uppercase. Let's try that one out. So if you say system.out.println, and we just paste that into there, name dot to uppercase. That should convert our name, which is girl spark, to all uppercase letters. So let's run the code. And it worked. Now girl spark is in all capital letters as opposed to what it was previously. So let's talk more about methods. Methods are basically places where you store blocks of code, and you can use these methods to complete certain tasks. So let's create a method called add exclamation. And we want this to add an exclamation point to the end of our string s. So we have our system.out.println, and then we say s plus exclamation. And you connect two strings with that plus sign. And we finish with our semicolon. So if we just run the code right now, all it should do is have the girl spark because we never called our method. So in our main method, we have to call our add exclamation and declare our string s. So let's call it robotics in quotation marks. So now if we run our code, it returns girl spark from where we set to uppercase, and then robotics with an exclamation mark from our new method that we created. We use methods a lot in robotics to organize our code, and it's way easier to go back and read our code and try to debug it if something doesn't work when we attempt to run it. So methods are a very helpful thing that we use a lot in robotics and just in general programming as well. So now that we've talked about storing data in variables and methods, both of which are very useful in robotics-related programming, let's move on to if-then-else statements. So if we say that an integer I is equal to 5, and we want to know if this integer is less than 3 or greater than 3, if we didn't know that it were 5. So we can say if I is less than 3, then the code should print less than 3. And if it's not less than 3, then the code should print greater than 3. So because we know that I is equal to 5, and we know that 5 is greater than 3, when we run it, it should print greater than 3. So let's see what happens. Yeah, it prints greater than 3. So how this works is it sees that the integer I is equal to 5. So the computer stores I to be equal to 5. So then it goes on and it says if I is less than 3. So at this point, it compares 5 and 3, and it knows that 5 is not less than 3. So it skips over this system.out.println, therefore not printing it. And it goes on to outside of these curly braces. And the next thing is else. So if 5 is not less than 3, then print this out. And because 5 is not less than 3, it prints out greater than 3. So if, then print, else, print. So if then else statements are very useful in robotics. For example, in our autonomous code, which is the section of code where we have no drivers controlling the robot and the robot runs on pre-programmed code. Let's say we want to know if the touch sensor is sensing a ring. We can say if the touch sensor is sensing a ring, then pick up the ring. If it's not sensing a ring, then keep moving forward. So we use if-then-else statements quite frequently in programming, especially for robotics.
So to recap today's video, today we talked about storing data in variables. Then we talked about creating methods and why they're useful. And finally, we talked about if-then-else statements and how we use them in robotics. Thank you so much for watching this video, and stay tuned for more robotics related and programming content. Don't forget to like and comment on this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching!